Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back. Way back. Well, landing ourselves squarely in a small muddy, and frankly quite fragrant English town, sometime in the 16th century. This is a journey into a world where your sharp tongue or a bit of neighborhood gossip isn't just message, but could earn you a rather unique piece of headwear. And trust me, it's not the kind of fashion statement you do want to make. You'll see what I mean. With the complete lack of modern sanitation, medicine, or Wi-Fi, you might not even survive the first day. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support truly means the world. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments what city you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see where our little community gathers from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice isn't a sound, but a feeling. It's the cold. A damp, bone-deep cold that seeps up from the packed earth floor, through the thin straw-stuffed mattress, and right into your bones. You pull the rough woolen blanket tighter around your shoulders, a futile gesture against the morning chill of your small timber-framed house. There are no thermostats here, no central heating, just the faint, lingering warmth from last night's embers in the hearth. You swing your legs out of bed, your bare feet meeting the cold floor. You don't flinch, this is the only reality you've ever known. The room is small, shadowed, and something vaguely like damp dog. A single, small window, paned with cloudy, imperfect glass, allows a sliver of grey or light to slice through the gloom. You can just make out the familiar shapes: a wooden chest holding your few possessions, a simple stool, and the dark maw of the fireplace. Your first task, as always, is to coax the fire back to life. You kneel on the stone hearth, carefully arranging kindling and blowing gently on the embers until a small, hesitant flame flickers into existence. This little fire is the heart of your home. It's your heat, your light, and your kitchen stove all in one. Forget your morning latte, you'll be lucky to get a lukewarm cup of small ale or a chunk of yesterday's bread for breakfast. As the fire grows, it pushes back the shadows, revealing the texture of your world. The walls aren't smooth drywall, they're a rough mixture of woven wooden strips or wattle, smeared with a thick layer of clay and dung, a technique called daub. It's actually a pretty effective insulator. But it does mean your house has a certain organic aroma. You glance at the floor and notice the dried herbs and rushes scattered about. This isn't for decoration, it's a constant, and mostly losing, battle against the grime and smells of daily life, a little bit of historical air freshener. It's a neat trick historians have noted. This use of strewing herbs like lavender and tansy to make life slightly more bearable. From outside, the sounds of the town waking up begin to filter in. The lowing of a cow being led to pasture, the distant, rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer, and the authoritative toll of the church bell, marking the hour for the faithful. Your world is small, contained within the sound of that bell. It dictates your day, marks your festivals, and tolls for your neighbors' funerals. You are a woman of this town. Your legal standing is complicated. According to the law and the church, you are under the authority of your father or your husband. Your property, your earnings, they technically belong to him. This is a quite tenet of the social structure of the time. Yet, the reality on the ground is often blurrier. You manage this household with an iron will. You might even have a small trade of your own, like selling eggs or brewing ale. The actual degree of economic and social autonomy women like you possessed is something historians still debate passionately. Were you a silent, powerless figure, or the savvy, indispensable manager of a domestic enterprise, wielding a quiet but significant influence in your community? The answer probably lies somewhere in the murky middle. You stand and stretch, the smoke from the fire making your eyes water slightly. You pour some water from a wooden bucket into a basin to wash your face. The water is icy and you use no soap. That's a luxury. You put on your clothes for the day, a simple linen shift, a heavy wool kirtle or dress laced up the front, and a coif to cover your hair. You are not a noble lady in fine silks, you are the backbone of this town. Opening the heavy oak door, the full sensory experience of the 16th century street hits you. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke, livestock, and the contents of 100 chamber pots that were likely emptied out of windows just an hour ago. The street is not paved, but a river of mud and filth. Across the narrow lane, your neighbor is already sweeping her doorstep, her eyes meeting yours for a brief, silent moment. The whole town is a stage, and everyone is an actor and an audience. You take a breath of the crisp, pungent air. It's just another day, or so you think. You grab a small basket and a few precious warm coins, tucking them safely into a pouch on your belt. Today's mission: the market. You need to buy salt, a vital commodity for preserving food, and if the merchant is in a good mood, maybe a small length of ribbon. Nothing frivolous, just something to mend the fraying edge of your daughter's dress. The walk to the market square is a masterclass in paying attention. You have to navigate the slop in the middle of the street, avoid the roaming pigs, the town's four-legged garbage disposal units, and sidestep a group of boisterous apprentices play fighting outside a workshop. This isn't a leisurely stroll, it's a practiced dance of survival. The houses lean in towards each other over the narrow street, their upper stories jutting out so far they nearly touch, casting the ground below in perpetual shadow. It's a clever, text-dodging architectural feature. You were text on your ground floor footprint, so you just built outwards as you went up. Historians call this feature a jetty, but you just call it the reason it's always dark down here. As you get closer to the center of town, the noise and the crowd swell. You emerge from the cramped lane into the brilliant, chaotic openness of the market square. And it is chaos. A vibrant, living, breathing mess of humanity. Stalls made of rough-hewn wood are crammed together, their canvas awnings flapping in the breeze. The air is a thick soup of smells: fresh baked bread from the baker's stall, the sharp tang of cheese, the sweet-trotted discarded vegetables, the earthy scent of livestock, and the overwhelming perfume of unwashed people. This square is the town's internet, its social media feed, and its 24-hour news channel all rolled into one. Here, information travels at the speed of speech. You see two women with their heads bent close together over a basket of fish, their hands gesturing wildly. They aren't just haggling over the price of herring, they're trading news. You catch a snippet of their conversation on the wind and her third cousin, the one who married the tanner. They say the baby came far too soon. You walk on, a small, knowing smile on your face. This is the currency of the market, as valuable as any coin. Gossip, rumor, and news are the threads that bind your small community together, for better or for worse. You spot the baker, a large man covered in a fine dusting of flour, putting loaves from a portable oven. His assistant is weighing each loaf on a set of scales. Getting the weights right is a big deal. The town employs officials, sometimes called bread weighers, to make short-changing customers. Being caught selling underweight bread could lead to a fine or a trip to the public pillory. It's one of the most fundamental regulations in this society. Speaking of odd jobs, you see the El Connor making his rounds. This is a genuinely weird piece of local government you take for granted. His job is to test the quality of the ale sold by the various brewers. You watch, fascinated as always, as he performs his peculiar ritual. He pours a puddle of the ale onto a wooden bench and then sits squarely in it with his thick leather breeches. He'll sit there for a bit, chat with the brewer, and then stand up. If his breeches stick to the bench, it means the ale has too much sugar in it and hasn't fermented properly. It's a low-quality brew, a sticky situation in every sense of the word. It's a bizarrely physical and strangely effective form of quality control. You finally reach the salt merchant's stall. H.E.S. a stern-looking man with a neatly trimmed beard. You have a few eggs in your basket from your own chickens. Now comes the eternal question of the pre-modern economy: do you barter, or do you pay with coin? How much of daily life ran on trade versus cash is a topic historians still argue about. Some believe communities like yours were highly localized, with most transactions being exchanges of goods and services. Others point to archaeological finds of coins everywhere to argue that a cash economy was far more embedded than we assume, even for small purchases. You decide to try your luck. You offer the eggs. The merchant inspects them, holds one up to the light, and then gruffly agrees to trade for a small scoop of salt. You saved your coins for another day. As he measures out your salt, you can't help but overhear the two women next to you. They aren't whispering. Their voices are loud, sharp, and laced with indignation as they argue with a cloth seller over the price of a bolt of wool. One of them is your neighbor, the one you saw this morning. Her face is flushed, and her words are as sharp as a needle. Do you think I was born yesterday? That price is an insult to my chickens, she cries, jabbing a finger at the merchant, and the argument escalates into a lively, public spectacle. A small crowd is gathering, some amused, some taking sides. Right now it's just market day drama. It's entertainment. You feel a pang of sympathy for your neighbor. The merchant is clearly overcharging, but you also feel a prickle of unease. A woman's voice, raised in public, is a powerful thing. And powerful thing. You collect your precious salt, keeping your head down and your opinions to yourself. You've got what you came for. It's time to go home, back to the relative quiet of your own hearth. But the sounds of the market, especially the sharp, angry voice of your neighbor, follow you all the way down the muddy lane. Back in the quiet confines of your small house, you unpack your winnings from the market. The small cloth bag of salt is carefully placed in a dry spot on a high shelf, away from any potential dampness. It's more precious than gold in some ways. It means the difference between a winter with preserved meat and a winter of hunger. As you go about your domestic tasks, stoking the fire, sweeping the rushes on the floor, mending a tear in your husband's shirt, you can't shake the scene from the market square out of your head. Your neighbor's raised voice, her flushed, angry face. You live in a world defined by order. It's a divinely ordained, natural order, or so the priest tells you every Sunday from the pulpit. God is in his heaven, the king is on his throne, the Lord is in his manor, and the man is the head of his household. It's a neat, tidy pyramid, and everyone has their place, and a woman's place well. That is a subject of endless discussion, prescription, and anxiety for the men who write the books and the laws. But this authority is supposed to be exercised quietly. When a woman speaks out of turn, especially in public, she is seen as disrupting that natural order. She's not just being rude, she's challenging the very structure of society. A scold, a shrew, a nag, these aren't just insults. They are accusations of social rebellion. Your neighbor at the market wasn't just arguing about the price of all, she was, in the eyes of many, stepping out of her God-given place, trying to wear the breeches, as the saying goes. This fear of the disorderly woman is everywhere. You see it in the popular woodcut prints sold at fairs, depicting scenes of wives beating their husbands or women on top in a world turned axle down. These are meant to be funny, a source of crude humor, but beneath the laughter is a deep-seated anxiety. What if women refused to be silent? What if they started demanding more? The whole pyramid could crumble. You pause your mending and look at your hands. They are not the soft, pale hands of a noble woman. They are chapped and strong with calluses from the loom and scars from kitchen knives. These hands bake bread, deliver babies, tend to the sick, and spin wool into thread. Your voice, when you use it, can soothe a crying child, haggle a better price for a chicken, and sing a hymn in church. But what if you used it to shout, to curse? To curse. A fascinatedly weird detail of your world is the legal concept of being a common scold. It's not just a description, it's an actual, indictable offense under common law. A woman who was habitually argumentative and disturbed the public peace could be formally charged by the community. Historians are still piecing together exactly what qualified someone as a common scold. Was it one loud argument, a series of public disputes, or was it often a convenient label for a woman who was simply unpopular, economically independent, or didn't fit neatly into the town's social boxes? The lines were incredibly blurry and subjective, often depending more on her social standing and who her husband was than on the actual volume of her voice. This legal framework turns private disputes into public matters. An argument between you and your neighbor isn't just a personal affair, it's a potential crack in the fabric of social peace. And the community, led by its male elders, feels it has a right, even a duty, to patch that crack, often in a very public and humiliating way. You finish your mending, tying off the thread with a neat knot. You think about your own speech. You are careful. You know when to lower your eyes, when to soften your voice, when to agree even if you think the butcher is a cheat. You learned this dance of deference from your mother, and she from hers. It is a survival skill, as essential as knowing how to light a fire or churn butter. But sometimes a spark of defiance ignites. When you see an injustice like the merchant fleecing your neighbor, when your child is wrongly accused of stealing an apple, in those moments the pressure to be silent wars with the instinct to speak truth. And you know deep down that this is a dangerous war to wage. Every woman in this town knows it. The line between being a respected matron and a notorious scold is terrifyingly thin. Today your neighbor crossed it. You wonder, with a shiver of apprehension that has nothing to do with the cold, what the consequences will be. The next few days pass in a quiet rhythm of domesticity, but the air in your little corner of the town feels different. It's charged, thick with unspoken things. You see your neighbor, whose name is Agnes, in her garden. You nod to her across the low wattle fence that separates your small plots of land. She nods back, but her eyes don't meet yours for long. There's a tightness around her mouth that wasn't there before. The usual morning greetings feel strained. The easy flow of small talk that once passed between you comments on the weather, the health of your chickens, the price of barley has dried up. The conflict begins, as so many do, over something small and stupid. One of your chickens, a particularly adventurous hen you call Matilda, has a habit of finding gaps in the fence. This morning, you see her happily scratching away in Agnes' meticulously tended herb garden, right next to a prized clump of parsley. Before you can even call out, Agnes storms out of her back door. "Get that pestilential creature out of my garden," she yells, her voice already sharp with an anger that seems too big for the situation. It's not just about the chicken. It's about the lingering humiliation from the market, the stress of her public confrontation, all it boiling over. You hurry over, shooing Matilda back towards your side of the fence. "My apologies, Agnes," you say, trying to keep your voice calm and placating. "She's a wily one. No harm done." "No harm done," she scoffs, gesturing at a slightly ruffled parsley plant. "She's ruined it. And this is not the first time. You let your beasts run wild. You have no consideration." The accusation stings not just because it's an exaggeration, but because it feels personal. It's an attack on your competence as a householder. "It's a chicken, Agnes, not a wolf," you reply, a bit of an edge creeping into your own voice. "It pecked at a leaf." "It's the principle," she retorts, her arms now crossed tightly over her chest. "Some of us try to maintain a respectable home, not a barnyard. And there it is. The implication that you are failing at your most fundamental duty. The word respectable hangs in the air between you. In this small, tightly knit community, reputation is everything. It is your social credit, your insurance policy against misfortune. An accusation of being unrespectable, even an indirect one, is a serious blow. The personal dispute over a chicken has just escalated into a battle over social standing. You feel your own anger rising. You work from dawn until dusk to keep your home in order, to feed your family, to be a good neighbor. Her words feel like a slap in the face. And some of us, you shoot back, your voice louder now than you intended. "Don't make a spectacle of ourselves," screaming at merchants in the market square for all the world to see. It's a low blow. You know it the second the words leave your mouth. You've taken her public shame and thrown it back at her. The color drains from Agnes' face, replaced by a flash of pure fury. The argument is no longer about chickens or parsley. It's about pride, shame, and the deep-seated anxieties of your world. "You dare?" she hisses, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper that is somehow more threatening than her shouting. "You with your high and mighty ears. I know what they say about you. About how you charm the butcher for a better cut of meat. A little too friendly, you are. This is how it works. This is the weaponization of gossip. She's twisting your social skills, your necessary daily negotiations for survival, into something sordid. It's no longer just an argument, it's a public performance. Your voices have carried. You notice the curtain in the window of the house opposite twitch. The cooper's wife, who was beating a rug outside, her work forgotten, her ears clearly tuned to your exchange. Historians often talk about the importance of neighborhood bonds and female support networks in this era. And they certainly existed. Women helped each other in childbirth, shared food in times of scarcity, and provided crucial emotional support. But the flip side of that intimacy was the potential for intense, vicious conflict. When those bonds broke, they broke spectacularly. The very closeness of your lives meant you knew exactly where each other's vulnerabilities were. The arguments were not abstract, they were deeply personal and deeply wounding. Whether these female-led disputes were more common or just more commented upon by male record-keepers is a question academics are still untangling. But the records that do exist, like court depositions, are filled with these kinds of neighborhood squabbles, often described in excruciating detail. Agnes takes a step closer to the fence. "You'll regret those words," she says, her eyes narrowed. "It's a threat, a promise." You stand your ground, your heart pounding in your chest, a mixture of fear and righteous anger swirling inside you. You want to take your words back, but your pride won't let you. You also want to say more to defend your reputation, but you know that would only add fuel to the fire. So you just stand there, in a tense, vibrating silence, glaring at each other across the flimsy wooden barrier. The chicken Matilda, blissfully unaware of the human drama she has caused, clucks contentedly at your feet. The boundary between your homes has become a front line in a war you didn't even know you were fighting. The silence that follows Agnes' threat is heavier than any shouting. The world seems to shrink down to the few feet of muddy ground between your two houses. The twitching curtain in the opposite window becomes still. The cooper's wife gives her rug one final, decisive thwack and retreats indoors. The show is over for now, but the damage is done. Your angry words, tossed back and forth over the wattle fence, have been absorbed into the very air of the neighborhood. They are now public property. You turn on your heel without another word, scoop up the oblivious Matilda, and stalk back into your house, your hands trembling. You latch the door firmly behind you, as if the thick oak can shut out the consequences of what just happened. But you know it can't. In a town this small, a shouted argument is like a stone thrown into a still pond. The ripples spread, and you can't control where they go. You spend the rest of the day in a state of anxious agitation. Every footstep you hear in the lane outside makes you jump. Is it Agnes? Is it her husband coming to complain to yours? Is it someone else, come to get a better look at the shrew who lives at number 3? You try to lose yourself in your work, kneading dough with a furious energy, scrubbing a pot with unnecessary vigor, but your mind keeps replaying the scene. Her face twisted with rage. Your own sharp, cutting reply, one single, venomous sentence that weaponized her public shame. Don't make a spectacle of ourselves screaming at merchants. In your world, words have immense power. They are not ephemeral puffs of air. They have weight and substance. A promise can bind you. A curse can, in the minds of many, bring real misfortune. And an insult can destroy a reputation that has taken a lifetime to build. The concept of slander and defamation is taken very, very seriously. In the local church courts, a significant number of cases are about exactly this, one person suing another for damaging their good name with words. "He called me a thief." These were not trivial matters. They were attacks on a person's social and economic survival. You made a critical error. Your argument with Agnes wasn't just a private spat. By referencing the market incident, you brought a public event into it. You essentially accused her of being a publicly recognized disorderly woman. And you did it in front of witnesses. The cooper's wife, the person behind the curtain, their versions of the story already spreading, likely getting more dramatic with each retelling. Did you hear the fight between the woman at number 3 and Agnes? Vicious it was, called her a public disgrace to her face. You sit by the fire, the bread now baking in the embers, and stare into the flames. What have you done? You were trying to defend yourself, your home, your respectability. But in doing so, you adopted the very behavior society condemns in women. You were loud, you were argumentative, you were confrontational, you stooped to her level, as the saying goes, and in a way, you proved her point. This moment highlights a cruel paradox for women in your time. If you are silent in the face of insult or injustice, you are seen as weak and your reputation can be trampled. But if you speak up, if you defend yourself with the same vigor a man might, you risk being labeled a scold or a shrew. It's a tightrope walk with no safety net. Historians are still debating the nuances of this paradox. Was it a deliberate system of control, or an unintended consequence of a patriarchal social structure? The effect, however, was the same. It created a powerful incentive for women to police not only their own speech, but the speech of other women as well. A disorderly woman in the neighborhood reflected poorly on everyone. You suddenly remember a strange story your grandmother once told you, about a woman in her village who was accused of being a scold. They didn't have a specific punishment for her at first. Instead, the men of the village organized a rough music parade. They gathered outside her house at night, banging pots and pans, blowing horns, and shouting insults. They called it riding the stang, where a man would be paraded on a pole, or stang representing the unruly woman's beaten husband. It was a form of public shaming, a community-led ritual designed to humiliate and intimidate someone into conforming. It was mob justice, thinly veiled as folk custom. Could that happen here? The thought sends a genuine chill of fear down your spine. The idea of your neighbors, people you've known your whole life, turning against you in such a cruel and public way is terrifying. Your single sentence, born of anger and pride, has suddenly acquired a terrifying weight. It wasn't just a word, it was a spark. And now you can only sit and wait, listening to the crackle of the fire, and wonder what kind of blaze it will ignite. The smell of baking bread fills your small home, a comforting, domestic scent that is starkly at odds with the cold dread knotting in your stomach. It happens 2 days later. The late afternoon sun is casting long shadows down the lane, and you are in your back garden, gathering the last of the herbs before the evening damp sets in. Your husband is due home from the fields soon, and you are trying to push the anxiety of the past few days to the back of your mind. You tell yourself it was just a foolish argument, a neighborly spat. It will blow over. People will forget. Then you hear it. Not the familiar sounds of evening, not the lowing of cattle or the chatter of neighbors. It's a heavy, purposeful tread of several pairs of feet on the muddy street outside your front door. And then a sharp, authoritative rap on the wood. It's not the friendly knock of a visitor. It's a summons. Your heart leaps into your throat. You wipe your earthy hands on your apron, your mind racing. Who could it be? You walk slowly through your small house, every nerve ending tingling. You lift the heavy latch and pull the door open, just a crack peering out. Standing on your doorstep are two men. One is the town constable, a stout, red-faced man named Thomas, whose main job is to keep the peace, break up brawls, and oversee punishments. He holds a short, thick staff of office, a symbol of his authority. Beside him is another man, a churchwarden, a layman responsible for the upkeep of the church and, unofficially, the moral policing of the parish. But they are not alone. Behind them, lurking at a respectful distance, is Agnes. Her face is a mask of grim satisfaction. And next to her stands her husband, a burly blacksmith, his arms crossed, looking deeply uncomfortable but resolute. The neighborhood has gone silent. Doors are slightly ajar. Faces peer from behind lidded glass windows. This is no longer a private matter. The official mechanisms of community control have been activated. "Good day to you," the constable says, his voice flat and devoid of any warmth. He doesn't use your name. There has been a complaint. A formal complaint. You know, of course you know, what this is about. But you have to play the part. "A complaint?" you ask, your voice a little shaky. "About what?" The constable gestures with his thumb towards Agnes. Agnes, wife of John the Smith, has made a complaint to the parish vestry. She claims you have disturbed the peace of this neighborhood, that you are a common disturber of your neighbors. He uses the formal language, the carefully chosen words that escalate a backyard squabble into a legal accusation. She claims you assailed her with foul and slanderous words and have created a public nuisance. A public nuisance. That's the key phrase. By framing it this way, Agnes has cleverly moved the issue from a personal insult to an offense against the entire community. It's a masterful piece of social and legal maneuvering. She's not just a wronged individual, she's a representative of the town's peace, which you have allegedly shattered. It was an argument, you stammer, looking past the constable to Agnes, who refuses to meet your gaze. A private disagreement between neighbors. It was heard by half the street. The church warden chimes in, his voice thin and reedy. That makes it a public matter. The peace of the parish must be upheld. This is how the system works. While you may live under the authority of a distant king and his formal laws, your immediate reality is governed by these local powers: the parish vestry, the manorial court, the constable. These institutions were the front line of justice and social control. They dealt with everything from roaming pigs to blasphemy, and they were staffed by your neighbors. The men now standing in judgment of you are the same men you might see at the market or in the pew next to you at church. This system of local justice is something historians find fascinating. It was both deeply personal and highly bureaucratic. Records from these local courts show an obsession with maintaining public order and conformity. The idea of privacy, as we know it, simply didn't exist. Your business was everyone's business, especially if it threatened the delicate social equilibrium. The constable Thomas looks at you, his expression unchanging. Hes heard this all 100 times before. Agnes and her husband have sworn a statement. The cooper's wife has also given testimony to what she heard. Your stomach plummets. The twitching curtain and the silent rug beater have become official witnesses against you. Their gossip has been transformed into evidence. You are trapped. If you deny it, you are calling 3 of your neighbors liars, a serious accusation in itself. If you admit to it, you are confessing to the crime of being a scold. You are to present yourself for a hearing at the Guildhall tomorrow morning, the constable declares. It is not a request. It is an order. The magistrate will hear the complaint. He raps his staff once on the ground for emphasis, a sharp, definitive sound that echoes in the silent name. Then, without another word, he and the church would turn and walk away. Agnes gives you one last, triumphant look before she and her husband retreat into their own home. You are left standing in your doorway, the cold evening air washing over you. The door of the cooper's wife clicks shut. The show is over. The formal machinery of shame has been set in motion, and it was all triggered by the arrival of these 2 men. The knock on your door wasn't just a knock. It was the sound of your private life being forcibly dragged into the public square. You slowly close your own door. The heavy sound of the latch sliding home, feeling less like security and more like the closing of a cage. The term echoes in the suffocating silence of your home. Bouncing off the wattle and door balls, a common disturber of your neighbors. It's a formal, legalistic phrase, but you know what it really means. They are calling you a scold. A shrew, a termagant, an angry woman. Your language has a surprising number of words for this specific type of female transgression. You sink onto the small stool by the cooling hearth, your body feeling heavy, as if the weight of the accusation is a physical thing. Your husband will be home soon. What will you tell him? How do you explain that a spat over a chicken has escalated into a formal hearing before the town magistrate? He will be shamed. Your family name will be dragged through the mud of the Guildhall. The humiliation is not just yours, it's a stain that spreads to everyone connected to you. This is the power of labeling. Once the word scold is officially attached to your name, it's incredibly difficult to shake off. It's not like a modern legal charge, which is either proven or dismissed. This is a judgment on your very character, your fundamental nature as a woman. It's a label that defines you in the eyes of the community. From now on, every time you speak with passion, every time you haggle at the market, every time you disagree with someone, it will be seen through the lens of this accusation. Oh, there she goes again, they'll whisper. What do you expect? She's an earned scold. You feel a surge of helpless fury. Agnes, with her own loud and public outburst at the market, is the one who gets to be the victim, the defender of the parish peace. And you, for one sharp-tongued retort in your own defense, are branded the aggressor, the public nuisance. The injustice of it is a bitter pill to swallow. It feels like a rigged game, where the rules are designed to ensure you can never truly win. which was seen as unseemly and aggressive, and often they were simply women who were old and lacked the social connections to protect them from a vindictive neighbor. The question that historians still grapple with is how much of this was about genuinely keeping the peace, and how much was about enforcing patriarchal control and punishing women who stepped outside their prescribed roles. Was the scold label a tool to silence inconvenient female voices? The evidence seems to suggest it was a very effective one. You think about the term itself, common scold. The word common is key. It implies a pattern of behavior. It's not about one single outburst, but about being known for it. It suggests you are a habitual offender, a chronic source of discord. Agnes and her husband, by getting the cooper's wife to testify, have built a narrative. They've pieced together isolated incidents, perhaps a sharp word you had with the baker last month, or the time you argued with a carter who nearly ran over your child, and woven them into a tapestry that depicts you as a perpetually angry and disruptive figure. Your entire personality is being redefined by your enemies. And what about the men? You've seen men get into raging arguments in the street, even come to blows outside the alehouse. They are fined for brawling, perhaps, or put in the stocks for being drunk and disorderly. But they are not labeled as common scolds. Their anger is seen as a momentary lapse of control, a predictable part of masculine nature. Your anger, however, is treated as a flaw in your fundamental character, a dangerous crack in the social order that needs to be ritually and publicly corrected. This gendered double standard is baked into the legal and social framework of your world. A weirdly specific piece of legal history is that, in some places, being a common scold was treated like a form of pollution. It was seen as an intangible corruption of the community's well-being, like a bad smell or a foul stream. The punishment, therefore, was often designed to ritually cleanse the community by dunking or silencing the source of the pollution. The famous dunking stool was a common punishment for this offense, where the convicted woman would be strapped to a chair at the end of a long pole and repeatedly submerged in the local river or pond. It was a brutal, terrifying, and deeply humiliating experience, often performed in front of the entire town. The latch clicks. Your husband is home. He steps inside, his face weary from a long day in the fields, and stops when he sees your expression. He knows immediately that something is wrong. You look at him, the words catching in your throat, and you finally manage to speak, your voice barely a whisper. I have been summoned to the Guildhall. Agnes has made a complaint. You watch the weariness in his face turn to disbelief, then to a slow dawning has begun. The label is being prepared, and you feel it pressing down on you like a physical weight. The Guildhall is the most imposing secular building in your town. It's not as grand or as tall as the church, but it represents a different kind of power. Built of stone and sturdy oak timbers, it's where the town's business is conducted, where taxes are collected, and where justice is dispensed. As you and your husband walk towards it the next morning, you feel the eyes of the town on you. Every glance from a passerby, every whispered conversation that stops abruptly as you approach, feels like a tiny stone being thrown at you. Your husband walks stiffly by your side, his face set in a grim mask. This is his shame as much as yours. He has failed to rule his own household, to keep his wife's done in check. You enter the hall. The main room is large and cavernous, with a high beamed ceiling and a floor paved with worn flagstones. The air is cool and smells of old wood, beeswax, and damp stone. At the far end of the room, on a raised platform, sits the magistrate. H.E.S. a wealthy war merchant, a man whose social standing places him far above the likes of you. This isn't a trial by a jury of your peers, it's a judgment by your social superior. A small table is set up for a clerk, who is scratching away in a ledger with a quill pen documenting the proceedings. Agnes and her husband are already there, standing to one side. Agnes looks pious and wronged, a model of aggrieved womanhood. You are directed to stand in the middle of the room, a defendant in an informal but terrifyingly real court. There is no lawyer to speak for you. You must defend yourself. The magistrate, a man with a fleshy, bored-looking face, peers down at you. So he begins, his voice booming slightly in the hall. You are the woman accused of disturbing the peace. The proceedings are swift and shockingly informal. There are no complex rules of evidence here. The magistrate first calls on Agnes' husband, John the Smith. He steps forward and gives a short, rehearsed-sounding statement about how his wife has been distressed by your constant provocations on shrewish tongue. He is careful to portray Agnes as the victim, a good wife suffering at the hands of an unruly neighbor. Then Agnes herself speaks. She recounts the incident with the chicken, framing it as the culmination of a campaign of harassment on your part. She weeps a few well-timed, delicate tears that run down her cheeks. All I want is to live in peace. Your worship, she says, her voice trembling. But she makes it impossible. Her tongue is a weapon. Then the cooper's wife is called. She nervously recounts the argument she overheard, her story conveniently forgetting Agnes' own shouted insults and focusing entirely on your angry retort. In her telling, you sound like a monster, a hurried Dan who flew into an unprovoked rage. The clerk scribbles it all down. It all feels like a play that has been written and rehearsed without you. You are the villain, and your part has already been decided. Finally, the magistrate turns his gaze to you. Well, what have you to say for yourself? Your heart is pounding. You open your mouth to speak, to explain your side of the story. You want to talk about the market, about how Agnes was already furious and looking for a fight. You want to point out the hypocrisy of her complaint. But how do you say that without sounding, well, exactly like the argumentative scold they are accusing you of being? Your worship, you begin, your voice smaller than you want it to be. It was an argument between us. She was angry, I was angry. Words were exchanged on both sides. But you admit you shouted at her. The magistrate presses. That you used insulting language. She insulted me first. The words burst out of you before you can stop them. They sound defensive and childish in the vast, solemn hall. The magistrate raises an eyebrow. That is not what these good people have testified. They say you were the aggressor, that you have a history of being sharp-tongued. He doesn't know you. He has never spoken to you before today, but he is accepting the narrative presented to him by your neighbors. Why? Because it's the easiest path. It reinforces the existing social order. Agnes is playing the role of the proper, subdued woman. You are not. Therefore, you must be the one at fault. The nature of these local hearings is a point of much discussion among legal historians. They were less about discovering objective truth and more about re-establishing social harmony, often by making an example of someone. The magistrate's goal isn't necessarily justice in the modern sense, it's order. A public dispute has occurred, and someone needs to be publicly designated as the wrongdoer to resolve the tension. You, by virtue of having fewer witnesses on your side and a less sympathetic story, are the most convenient candidate. You try to defend your character. I am a good wife. I keep a clean home. I am a regular churchgoer. You list your virtues, trying to build a picture of yourself as a respectable member of the community, but it feels desperate. Your words sound hollow against the specific, dramatic testimony of your accusers. Your husband steps forward. Your worship, my wife is a good woman. She's not a troublemaker. His defense is loyal but weak. It even sounds a little pathetic, the plea of a man who cannot control his own wife. The magistrate listens, his expression impassive. He has already made up his mind. He doesn't need to. The outcome was preordained the moment the constable knocked on your door. He leans forward, his hands clasped on the desk in front of him. It is the judgment of this court, he announces, that you are guilty of being a common scold and a disturber of the peace. He says the words calmly, as if he were commenting on the weather. And for such a crime, there is a prescribed and fitting punishment. He looks not at you, but at the constable, who gives a slight, almost imperceptible nod. A cold red, colder than anything you have ever felt, spreads through your body. The sham of a trial is over. The magistrate leans back in his chair, a flicker of something not quite satisfaction, more like weary administrative finality in his eyes. He doesn't look at you as he pronounces the sentence. He looks at the constable as if you are no longer a person to be addressed, but an object to be dealt with. The usual remedy is required, he says, his voice devoid of emotion, to quiet the tongue and restore the peace. See to it, constable. Constable Thomas nods again. His face is impassive as ever. He turns and walks towards a large, dark oak chest that sits against the wall of the guild hall. The chest is bound with iron straps and secured with a heavy lock. He produces a large, rusty key from his belt, inserts it into the lock, and turns it with a loud, grating groan. The sound echoes in the silent hall, a mechanical screech that seems to tear through the last of your composure. He lifts the heavy lid of the chest. A faint, musty smell of cold iron and old leather wafts out. He reaches inside and pulls out an object. He holds it up for the magistrate to see, but your eyes are glued to it, a knot of ice forming in your stomach. It's a bizarre and terrifying contraption. At first glance, it looks like a sort of cage or helmet made of dark, pitted iron bands, crudely riveted together. It's designed to fit over a human head. There's a main hoop that would go around the crown, with other bands that curve down to form a cage around the face. A locking mechanism with a hinge and a clasp hangs at the back, meant to be fastened behind the neck. It's a piece of brutal, functional blacksmithing, clearly designed not for beauty, but for purpose. But the most horrific part, the detail that makes your blood run cold, is the piece of metal that juts inward from the front of the cage. It's a flat, rectangular plate of iron, about 2 inches long, sometimes called a bit or a gag. You understand its function instantly. This is it, the usual remedy. It's known by several names. Some call it the Branks bridle or simply the Branks. Others, more poetically and cruelly, call it the Scold's bridle. You've heard whispers of this device. It's the kind of thing people talk about in hushed, fearful tones, a punishment reserved for the most incorrigible, the most disorderly of women. You've seen crude woodcut images of it, but you never, ever thought you would see one in person, let alone that it would be intended for you. The constable places the bridle on the clerk's table with a heavy, metallic thud. The sound seems to punctuate the end of your life as you know it. You stare at it. The iron is dark with age and rust. It looks ancient, heavy, and unyielding. It's not just an object, it's a symbol. It's the physical manifestation of the community's desire to control and silence you. The historical origins of the Scold's bridle are murky, a topic that scholars still debate. Some trace it back to Scotland in the 16th century, where it was first recorded as a formal punishment. Others suggest it may have older, folk punishment roots, evolving from informal shaming rituals into an officially sanctioned tool of the state. There's no single, universally agreed upon blueprint for these devices. They varied in design from town to town, each one a unique, handcrafted instrument of humiliation. Some were simple iron cages. Others were more elaborate, with a bell attached to the top to draw more attention to the wearer, or even grotesque features like a long, pointed nose, to make the victim look even more ridiculous. One of the strangest and most chilling facts about the bridle is that, in many places, it wasn't a punishment prescribed by national law. You wouldn't find the Scold's bridle listed in the official statutes handed down by the King's Parliament. Instead, it was a local punishment, a tool of municipal or parish justice. It was part of a town's own set of bylaws, a reflection of a specific community's anxieties and its methods for dealing with them. This is why its use was patchy. Some towns used it frequently, while others seem never to have had one at all. Your husband makes a choked, strangled sound beside you. He takes a half-step forward, as if to protest, but a sharp look from the constable freezes him in place. What can he do? To argue now would be to show contempt for the court, risking a fine or even a day in the stocks for himself. He is as powerless as you are. You can't take your eyes off the bridle. You imagine the cold, rough texture of the iron against your skin, the weight of it on your head and neck. You imagine the iron plate being forced into your mouth, the metallic, rusty taste of it, the brutal pressure on your tongue rendering you mute. It's a device designed not to cause intense physical pain, though. It would certainly be deeply uncomfortable, but to inflict the maximum possible psychological torment and public shame. It is an instrument of pure humiliation designed to strip you of your voice, your identity, and your dignity. The magistrate gestures dismissively. The sentence is passed. The punishment will be carried out immediately. Immediately. There is no time to appeal, no time to prepare. The constable picks up the iron bridle. The cold, inanimate object suddenly seems alive, predatory. He takes a step towards you. This is happening. It is real. The constable, Thomas, approaches you, holding the scold's bridle in his large, calloused hands. The iron feels like it radiates a coldness that has nothing to do with the temperature of the room. He moves without any particular malice, but with a grim, bureaucratic efficiency. This is his job. He has likely done this before. You, in this moment, are not a person to him. You are a task to be completed. Your body reacts before your mind can. You stumble back a step, a small, involuntary movement of self-preservation. Your husband reaches for your arm, but you barely feel his touch. Your entire world has narrowed to the terrifying iron object in the constable's hands. Be still, the constable says, his voice a low grumble. It's not a request. Two other men, assistants to the constable, step forward from the sides of the hall. They are there to ensure the sentence is carried out smoothly. One moves to stand behind you, cutting off any path of retreat. The other stands at your side. You are surrounded. There is no escape. You look desperately towards the magistrate, but he is already shuffling papers on his desk, his attention deliberately averted. He has passed the sentence. The messy business of its execution is beneath him. You glance at Agnes. For a fleeting moment, you see a flicker of something in her eyes, not triumph, perhaps, but a sliver of shock, as if the reality of the punishment is more brutal than she had imagined in her anger. Then she looks away, hardening her expression. Her husband placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. The constable is in front of you now. You can smell the faint scent of wood smoke and sweat on him. He holds the bridle up. The cage part is open on its hinge, like a grotesque iron ready to bite down. Open your mouth, he commands. You press your lips together, a final futile act of defiance. A sob catches in your throat. This can't be happening. The man behind you places his hands firmly on your shoulders, holding you in place. The constable raises the bridle. With one hand he cups the back of your head, forcing it forward. With the other he brings the front of the bridle towards your face. You twist your head away. But his grip is like a vice. He is not gentle. He uses his thumb to pry your lips apart, forcing your jaw open. And then you feel it, the shocking, invasive cold of the iron bit, as it's thrust into your mouth. It's rough and tastes metallic, of rust and something else, something old and stale. It's not sharp, but its edges are blunt and hard. It presses down on your tongue with an unyielding, gagging pressure, forcing it flat against the floor of your mouth. You try to spit it out, to scream, but the pressure is too great. All that comes out is a muffled, guttural sound, a pathetic whimper. The bit effectively pins your tongue, the primary instrument of your speech, making it impossible to form words. You can't shout, you can't test, you can't be silenced completely and brutally. While you are still reeling from the shock and violation of the gag, the constable swings the rest of the iron cage over your head. The bands settle heavily on your scalp and cheeks. The iron is cold against your skin. He brings the back piece around and fastens it, at the nape of your neck. You hear a loud, definitive click as the clasp is locked. The weight is immediate and surprising. It's not just the physical weight of several pounds of iron on your head, which forces your neck to strain. It's the psychological weight. Your head is encased. Your vision is partially obscured by the iron bars that curve in front of your eyes. You are looking at the world from inside a cage. The hall, the people, everything seems distant, viewed through a grid of black iron. The pressure of the bit in your mouth is constant and nauseating. You can feel saliva pooling with no way to swallow properly. A thin trickle of drool escapes the corner of your lips, a humiliating loss of bodily control. The iron presses against the sensitive tissue under your tongue, and a dull, aching pain begins to radiate through your jaw. This moment of forced submission is a deeply symbolic act. Historians who study the bridle argue about its primary function. Was it purely punitive, or was it also seen as curative? Some contemporary accounts describe it as a cure for a scolding tongue, as if a woman's outspokenness was a disease and this brutal device was the medicine. This twisted logic suggests the bridle didn't just punish the crime but aimed to correct the flaw in the woman's character by physically restraining the offending organ, the tongue. It's a chillingly direct application of social theory. If a woman's speech is the problem, the solution is to physically stop it at the source. There's a strange, quasi-medical cruelty to it, a belief that you can fix a person's personality through mechanical force. The debate over whether this was seen as punishment is ongoing, but for you, locked inside this iron cage, it is torment. The constable steps back to admire his work, a craftsman inspecting a finished product. You stand there in the center of the guild hall, your head heavy, your mouth violated, your dignity stripped away. You can hear a few nervous coughs from the small audience of onlookers. The clerk has stopped writing and is staring at you with a morbid curiosity. You are no longer their neighbor. You have been transformed into a spectacle, a living, breathing symbol of what happens to women who speak out of turn. The world outside the iron bars of your new prison looks blurry, distorted by the tears that are now welling in your eyes and beginning to trace hot paths down your cheeks. The magistrate gives a curt nod to the constable. The hearing is officially over, but your punishment is only just beginning. The true purpose of the bridle is not just to silence you, but to display your silencing to the entire community. It is a tool for public theater. Constable Thomas retrieves a length of rough rope from the same chest where the bridle was stored. He loops one end of it through a heavy iron ring at the top of the bridle, right at the crown of your head. He holds the other end of the rope like a leash. The humiliation deepens. You are not just to be caged, but to be led like an animal. Like a bear being led to a baiting, or a horse being taken to market. Time for a walk, the constable says, his voice loud enough for everyone in the hall to hear. The assistants open the great double doors of the guild hall, and the sounds and light of the market square outside flood in. For a moment, you are blinded. The normal, chaotic noise of the town, the shouting of vendors, the laughter of children, the clatter of a cart on the cobblestones sounds unnaturally loud and sharp. The constable gives a sharp tug on the rope. The iron ring on top of your head pulls, forcing you to stumble forward. You have no choice but to follow. You step out of the cool darkness of the guild hall and into the bright, open square. The reaction is immediate. A ripple of silence spreads out from the guild hall doors as people turn to look. The vendor who was shouting about the quality of his cabbages falls silent. The woman haggling over a piece of cloth stops mid-sentence. All eyes turn to you. Then, the silence is replaced by a low murmur that quickly grows into a wave of noise. Gasps, pointing fingers, whispers that are just loud enough for you to hear through the iron bars of your cage. Look, it's the woman from down the lane. The scold's bridle. I've not seen that used in years. What did she do? Argued with Agnes, they say. A terrible tom on her. You are the center of a vortex of attention. You, who have spent your life trying to maintain a respectable, unremarkable existence, are now the most scandalous and fascinating spectacle in the entire town. You try to lower your head, to hide your face, but the bridle forces your chin up. The iron cage makes it impossible to conceal your identity. It frames your face for all to see, turning your personal shame into a public exhibition. The constable begins to walk, leading you on a slow, deliberate circuit of the market square. This is the walk of shame, a ritual as old as the town itself. It is designed for maximum visibility. He is parading you past the stalls of the merchants you know, past the faces of your neighbors, past the very spot where Agnes had her argument just a few days ago. The route is not random. It is a carefully choreographed tour of your own life. He leads you past the baker, whose florid face is a mixture of pity and fear. He leads you past the butcher, who avoids your gaze, suddenly busy with a side of beef. He leads you past the church, its stone spire looming over the square, a silent, stony witness to your degradation. The purpose of this public humiliation is twofold, as historians have pointed out. First, it is a punishment for you. It is meant to break your spirit, to so thoroughly shame you that you will never dare to speak out of turn again. Second, and perhaps more importantly, it is a warning to others. Your punishment is a lesson for every other woman in the square. This is what happens when you are too masterful. This is the concept disrupting the social order. It's a powerful to love social control using one person's suffering to enforce conformity in hundreds of others. You stumble on a loose cobblestone, and the tug of the rope on your head is sharp and painful. The crowd parts before you like water. then closes in behind you, a curious, murmuring wake. The sounds are a confusing jumble. The iron cage around your head seems to amplify some noises and muffle others. The buzzing of a fly near your ear sounds deafening, while the shouts of the crowd feel distant and surreal. It's a bizarre and cruel inversion of a festival parade. A procession, not a celebration, but of degradation. Sometimes, for other crimes, the crowd would throw rotten vegetables or mud at the person in the stocks or pillory. But for a woman in a bridal, the reaction is often different. It's less about aggression and more about a kind of morbid, cautionary fascination. They are watching you, and they are learning. The mothers in the crowd pull their daughters a little closer, perhaps whispering a warning. The men watch with a mixture of expressions, some with grim approval, some with pity, a few with a crude amusement. You are utterly alone, trapped in a bubble of shame, led on a rope through the heart of your own community. The sun is warm on your shoulders, but all you feel is the cold iron on your head and even colder stares of 100 eyes. The walk has just begun, and already it feels like a lifetime. Your world is now a grid of intersecting iron mines. The familiar faces of your town are framed and fragmented by the cage you wear. Through one square of the grid, you see the worried face of the baker's wife, her hands frozen in a lump of dough. Through another, you see a group of young apprentices, their usual boisterousness replaced by a kind of cocking silence. They are not jeering, not yet. They are simply watching, their faces a mixture of curiosity and a dawning understanding of the town's power. The constable leads you onward, his pace steady and unhurried. He is giving everyone a good, numb look. As you pass the fishmonger's stall, the smell of fish and seawater hits you, a normal, everyday scent that now seems to belong to a different world, a world you are no longer fully a part of. The fishmonger's wife, a woman you have known since you were both girls, quickly turns her back, pretending to rearrange a pile of herring. Her shame on your behalf, her fear of association, is a sharper pain than the weight of the iron on your head. Her refusal to meet your eyes confirms your new status. You are a pariah. You see children in the crowd. Some of them point, their faces alight with a cruel, unthinking excitement at this break in the daily routine. A small boy, no older than your own son, asks his mother in a loud, piercing voice, "What did the lady do wrong, Mama?" His mother quickly shushes him, pulling him away, her face a mask of embarrassment and stern disapproval. But the question hangs in the air. You are now a cautionary tale, a real-life bogeyman to frighten naughty children into obedience, or they'll put the bridle on you. And then you see the other faces, the faces of the women. Their reactions are the most painful to witness. You see older women, matriarchs of the town, their faces hard and stony. They nod with grim approval. To them, you are a threat to the stability they have worked their whole lives to maintain. You have broken the rules they have lived by, and in their eyes, your punishment is just unnecessary. They are the guardians of tradition, and your humiliation reinforces the righteousness of their own silence and conformity. You see women your own age, women you have shared gossip with, traded recipes with, and stood beside at weddings and funerals. Their faces are a confusing mix of pity, fear under strange, subtle relief, pity for your suffering. Fear because they know how easily it could be them in your place, and relief that it isn't them. They are watching you and thinking, that could have been me. I must be more careful. I must be quieter. You are a living lesson. And they are diligent student. Your suffering is their shield. This specific dynamic women policing other women is a critical aspect that historians emphasize when studying social control in this era. The patriarchal system was so effective not just because men enforced it, but because women were often enlisted as its most zealous enforcers. By punishing a deviant woman, other women could reinforce their own status as good and respectable. It was a tragic but effective way of dividing and conquering, of preventing female solidarity from ever becoming a threat to the established order. A few faces show pure, unadulterated pity. A young, newly married woman near the edge of the crowd looks at you, her eyes wide with horror. She puts a hand to her own mouth, as if she can feel the phantom pressure of the iron bit. For a moment, her eyes meet yours through the bars of your cage. In her gaze, you see no judgment, only a shared, gendered terror. She is the future. You are her warning. The most bizarre and chilling reactions come from the men. Some of them are openly laughing, making crude jokes to their friends. To them, this is street theater, a bit of rough entertainment. The sight of a woman, especially a shrewish one, being so thoroughly and publicly humbled is, for some, a source of deep satisfaction. It confirms their sense of a natural order, but others look away, their faces clouded with discomfort. Your husband, trailing behind at a helpless, humiliating distance, is not the only man who looks ashamed. You see other husbands and fathers in the crowd who seem to be thinking, what if that were my wife, my daughter? Through a gap in the crowd, you see Agnes. She hasn't followed the procession, but she is watching from the steps of the Guildhall, her husband beside her. Her expression is no longer triumphant. It is strained pale. The reality of the punishment she has set in motion is stark and brutal. The theoretical justice she sought has manifested as this slow, agonizing parade of degradation. Does she feel remorse, or is she simply solidifying her own role as the virtuous victim? The complexity of human emotion in this moment is something historians can only speculate on, piecing together clues from dry legal records. You are an object of 1,000 different interpretations. To some, you are a monster. To others, a victim. To many, you are simply a spectacle. But to all of them, you are no longer just their neighbor. You are a symbol. Trapped inside your iron cage, you are forced to watch your own social death, one agonizing step at a time. The world outside your iron cage is a cacophony, but inside there is only silence. Your own silence. It is a profound and terrifying void. Your primary tool for engaging with the world, for expressing pain, fear, or anger, has been taken from you. All you have left is the ability to make noise but not scent. You try to scream. You gather up all the fear and rage and humiliation inside you and try to force it out. But the iron bit on your tongue stops it. The sound that escapes your lips is a choked, desperate moan, a low, animalistic sound of distress. It is the sound of powerlessness. It doesn't inspire fear or command respect, it inspires a mixture of pity and disgust from the crowd. Your attempt to cry out only makes you seem more pathetic, more broken. The bridle is working exactly as intended. You try to cry. The tears flow freely now, hot and shameful, carving clean paths through the dust and grime on your cheeks. But crying feels different when you can't make a sound. You can't sob, you can't wail. The physical release of vocalizing your grief is denied to you. The tears just run silently, a quiet, internal flood. It feels like you are drowning in your own sorrow. The iron plate in your mouth is a constant, invasive presence. You are acutely aware of it every second. It presses, it chafes, it gags. Your tongue feels swollen and clumsy beneath it. You try to swallow, but the mechanism is awkward, and you choke on your own saliva. A dribble of spittle mixed with tears runs down your chin, and you have no free hand to wipe it away. This loss of basic physical control is a deeper humiliation than the pointing fingers or the whispers. It reduces you to an infantile state. Your mind, however, is screaming. It is a silent, frantic monologue of why and how and this isn't fair. You think of the words you said to Agnes. Don't make a spectacle of ourselves. The irony is so bitter it feels like bile rising in your throat. You have become the ultimate spectacle. Your punishment is a grotesque parody of your own accusation. This feeling of being trapped, of having a voice but being unable to use it, is the very essence of the bridle's psychological cruelty. Historians have often drawn parallels between the scald's bridle and other forms of silencing, both historical and metaphorical. It's a physical manifestation of what it feels like to be censored, to be told your opinion doesn't matter, that your voice is an inconvenience. The debate continues about whether the designers of these devices understood this complex psychological impact, or if they were simply aiming for a crude, effective form of control. But the result is the same, a profound and lasting trauma. You are being led past the alehouse now. A group of men, already drinking in the middle of the day, spill out into the street to get a better look. One of them, a burly carter with a red boozy face, lurches towards you. He peers at you through the bars of the cage, his face uncomfortably close. He smells of stale ale and onions. Give us a speech, mistress, he slurs to the delight of his friends. Tell us your thoughts on the price of barley. They roar with laughter. The joke is obvious and cruel. They are mocking your inability to speak. You flinch away from his foul breath, turning your head, but the bridle moves with you. There is no escape from the mockery. You are a captive audience to your own humiliation. The constable gives the rope a sharp tug, pulling you away from the drunken man. He is not protecting you out of kindness. He is protecting the integrity of the punishment. This is an official act of the town's justice, not a free-for-all for a drunken mob. It must maintain a veneer of grim solemnity. As you continue your slow, agonizing walk, you realize something else. The bridle is not just silencing your protests, it's silencing your ability to explain, to apologize, to show remorse. Even if you wanted to, you could not say, "I was wrong." You are frozen in the role of the defiant shrew, even if you no longer feel defiant at all. The punishment removes any possibility of nuance or reconciliation. It simply casts you as the villain and holds you there. One of the lesser-known, more bizarre variations of the bridle, found in some historical records, was a type that didn't just have a gag, but also a funnel. The idea was that ale or some other noxious liquid could be poured into the funnel and down the victim's throat, a further act of degradation. While this seems to have been rare, its very conception shows the depths of cruelty and the bizarre logic that underpin these punishments. Your silent scream continues to echo in the chambers of your skull. It's a scream against Agnes, against the magistrate, against the laughing man, against the neighbors who turned their backs. But most of all, it's a scream against the cold, unyielding iron that encases your head and pins your tongue. It is a scream against the injustice of a world that has 1,000 words for a woman's anger but no ear for her voice. And nobody at all can hear it. Time becomes a strange, syrupy thing. The sun creeps across the sky, but for you, the journey around the market square feels both fleeting and eternal. Each step is a lifetime, the entire ordeal is a blur. Your focus shrinks down to the most basic physical sensations. The ache in your neck from the weight of the iron, the sharp, rhythmic chafe of the bridle's bands against your cheeks and scalp, the relentless, dull pressure in your jaw. The iron bit in your mouth is now the center of your universe. The initial shock has given way to a persistent, grinding misery. Your tongue is tender and feels swollen. Your mouth is dry, yet you can't stop the humiliating trickle of drool. The taste of rust is a constant, coppery tang on your palate, a taste you know you will never forget. The constable finally leads you away from the bustling market square and down a side street. The crowd thins, though a few curious children and idle adults still follow at a distance, unwilling to let the spectacle end. He stops in front of a familiar building, the parish church. He doesn't take you inside. Instead, he leads you to the churchyard. Near the main gate, and stops. He ties the other end of the rope leash to the lich gate, the covered gate at the entrance to the churchyard where coffins are traditionally rested before a funeral. He is leaving you here, on display. An hour, he grunts, more to himself than to you. That should be sufficient to cool your humors. He then turns and walks away, leaving you tethered like a stray dog. This is a new and refined form of cruelty. The walk was a moving torment, but this is a stationary one. You are now a living statue, an installation of public art dedicated to the theme of female subjugation. You are placed here for a reason. Anyone going to the church for prayer, anyone passing by on their way home, will have to see you. You are an unavoidable moral lesson, placed deliberately at the gateway to the community's spiritual heart. The minutes stretch into an eternity. The sun beats down on the iron cage, and it begins to warm up. The metal, once shockingly cold, is now unpleasantly warm against your skin. A fly, attracted by the moisture on your chin, buzzes persistently around your face. But the movement is clumsy and painful, and the fly immediately returns. This tiny, insignificant creature becomes a source of exquisite torture, another reminder of your utter helplessness. You lean your head back against the cold stone of the gatepost, trying to find a position that eases the strain on your neck. The pain is no longer sharp, but a deep, throbbing ache that spreads from your jaw, up to your temples, and down into your shoulders. This physical discomfort is a significant part of the punishment, a way of breaking down your resilience. The long-term health effects of wearing a scald's bridle are, unsurprisingly, not well documented. But historians and medical experts can make educated guesses. The pressure on the jaw could lead to temporal and joint disorders (TMJ). The gag itself could cause lasting damage to the tongue, teeth, and gums. Choking was a real risk, and the psychological trauma, the combination of public humiliation, helplessness, and physical misery, would have been profound and lasting, likely leading to what we would now diagnose as post-traumatic stress disorder. You close your eyes, trying to retreat into the darkness of your own mind. But there's no escape there either. All you can see are the faces from the crowd, the laughing man, the pitying girl, the stony-faced matrons, the averted gaze of your friend, and Agnes. Her pale, strained face floats in your memory. You feel a surge of pure, impotent hatred for her. Then you feel a wave of shame for your own words, the ones that started this whole nightmare. The emotions churn inside you, a toxic, silent too. A woman walks by, carrying a basket of laundry. She sees you, and her step falters. She makes the sign of the cross as if to ward off evil, and hurries on her way, her eyes fixed firmly on the ground in front of her. Her reaction tells you everything. You are not just being punished, you are considered unclean. A source of moral contamination. Whether the bridle was ever used for extended periods is a matter of historical debate. Most records suggest it was for a few hours at most, as the primary goal was the public spectacle. However, there are some anecdotal, and perhaps exaggerated, accounts of it being used for longer, or even of women being forced to wear it while performing hard labor. The line between official punishment and sadistic cruelty could be perilously thin, depending entirely on the whims of the local authorities. The church bell tolls the hour. The deep, resonant bong vibrates through the stone you are leaning against. The sound marks the passing of another hour of your life, an hour stolen by iron and shame. The constable said, "An hour, is your ordeal nearly over?" Or was that just a figure of speech? In the timeless, painful bubble of your punishment, you have no way of knowing. You can only stand and wait and ache. Just as you begin to think you have been forgotten, that you will be left tethered to the church gate until nightfall, you hear the heavy tread of the constable's boots on the cobblestones. He approaches you without a word, his face as neutral and unreadable as it was this morning. He pulls a key from his belt, not the big, rusty one for the padlock on the bridle itself. He unties the rope from the lich gate first, coiling it methodically. Then he stands behind you. You flinch as you feel his hands on the back of your head. He fumbles with the lock for a moment, and you hear a small metallic snick as the clasp comes undone. The relief is not immediate. First, there is only the strange sensation of the pressure changing. He lifts the heavy iron cage from your head. The sudden lightness is disorienting. Your neck muscles, which have been straining against the weight for hours, feel weak and unsteady. You instinctively raise a hand to your hair, which is matted and damp with sweat. Your scalp is tender where the iron bands pressed against it. But the cage is off. You can see the world again without the grid of iron bars. The evening light seems incredibly bright, almost painfully so. The world looks wider, more open. The constable moves to stand in front of you. "Open," he grunts. This time you obey without hesitation. Your jaw is stiff and sore, and it protests as you slowly open your mouth. He reaches in, not with his bare fingers, but with a small pair of pliers. A tool of his trade and grips the iron bit. He pulls. The sensation of the gag sliding out of your mouth is both a relief and a fresh violation. It scrapes against your swollen tongue and the roof of your mouth, and then it's gone. You are free. You take a deep, shuddering breath. The air feels cool and clean in your mouth, a stark contrast to the stale, rusty taste that has been your reality for hours. You try to swallow, and your throat works properly. You lick your lips, tasting the salt from your tears. You try to speak. You want to say something, anything. But your tongue feels thick, clumsy, and foreign in your own mouth. The muscles are stiff and sore. The first sound you make is a hoarse, croaking noise, not a word. You clear your throat and try again. Water, you manage to rasp. Your voice is a dry, scratchy whisper. The constable gestures with his head towards the public pump in the square. He does not offer to get it for you. His job is done. The punishment has been administered. He turns, the bridle dangling from his hand, and walks back towards the Guildhall, leaving you standing alone and unsupported for the first time in hours. You feel a profound sense of dislocation, as if you've just woken from a long, terrible fever dream. Is it over? The physical torture is yes. The iron is gone. But as you stand there, swaying slightly on your feet, you realize that the punishment has just entered a new, more insidious phase. You are free, but you are not the same person who woke up in her bed this morning. The woman from this morning was a wife, a mother, a neighbor. This woman, the one standing shaky and sore in the churchyard, is the scold. She is the woman who wore the bridle. The iron may be gone, but the label is now permanently affixed to your name, more binding than any law. The question of what happened to women after the punishment is one that deeply interests social historians, but the records are often silent on the matter. The court documents record the crime and the sentence, but not the long-term aftermath. Did these women successfully reintegrate into the community? Were they forever marked and ostracized? Did the punishment work, in the sense that it silenced them permanently? Or did it breed a deeper, more silent resentment? It's a chilling historical unknown. There are no memoirs from women who wore the bridle. Their experiences are lost to us, and we can only reconstruct them through imagination and by studying the cold, impersonal records left by the men who punished them. Some historians theorize that for some women, the experience was so traumatic it led to a complete withdrawal from community life. For others it might have been a badge of a strange, defiant sort of honor, a sign that they had refused to be broken. The reality was likely different for every single woman who endured it. You look down at your hands. They are trembling. You touch your cheek, which is raw and chafed. You run your newly freed tongue over your teeth, feeling the tender spots in your mouth. The physical evidence of your ordeal is real, but the invisible wounds you suspect are far deeper. You take a tentative step, then another. Your legs feel unsteady. Your destination is home, but you are not sure what home means anymore. You are a spectacle that has been discarded. The show is over, the audience has dispersed, and you are left to pick up the pieces of your life in the quiet, echoing aftermath. The freedom you feel is terrifyingly empty. The walk home is the longest, loneliest walk of your life. It's only a few hundred paces from the churchyard to your front door, a path you have trod thousands of times without a second thought. But today every step is fraught with a new and terrible self-awareness. The route that was once familiar and comforting is now a gauntlet of perceived judgment. The sun is low in the sky, casting the narrow lane in a deep, evening gloom. The market square has mostly emptied out, the merchants packing up their stalls, their day's work done. The main performance is over, and the town is returning to its normal rhythm. But for you, nothing is normal. You keep your head down, your gaze fixed on the muddy ground in front of you. You don't want to see anyone. You don't want to meet anyone's eyes. But you are hyper-aware of every sound, every movement. A door creaking open. A shutter being closed. I cough from an unseen window above. Are they watching you? Of course they are watching you. You are the day's great story. You pass the cooper's workshop. He is standing in the doorway, wiping his hands on a rag. He sees you coming. For a moment, you think he will say something, perhaps an awkward word of pity. Instead, he gives a curt, almost imperceptible nod and then turns back into the shadows of his workshop, busying himself with a stack of staves. He is not being cruel, he is simply disengaging. He is treating you like a problem he doesn't want to be involved with. His wife, the witness, is nowhere to be seen. You reach the short stretch of lane where your own house stands. You see your front door, a rectangle of familiar, weathered oak. It feels like a sanctuary, but also like the door to a prison. Outside is the community that has shamed you, inside is the isolation where that shame will fester. Across the way you see Agnes. She is in her garden pretending to weed a patch of herbs, the very same garden where this whole nightmare began. She must have seen you coming. She keeps her back to you, her shoulders rigid. She does not speak. Her silence is a statement. She has won. She has successfully used the town's power to crush you. There is no remorse in her posture, only a brittle, defensive silence. The flimsy wattle fence between your homes now feels like a vast, uncrossable wall. The neighborly bond, however frayed it was before, has been permanently severed. This outcome, the complete destruction of a relationship between neighbors, is a common feature in the court records of the time. These legal battles weren't just about resolving a single issue, they were often about fundamentally redrawing social boundaries. After a public shaming like this, it was almost impossible for the two parties to return to a normal, amicable relationship. The community, by punishing you, has implicitly sanctioned Agnes's side of the story. You have been officially cast as the villain, and she as the victim. To befriend you now would be to question the judgment of the magistrate and the entire town. You reach your door and your hand trembles as you lift the latch. You slip inside, closing it quickly behind you, leaning against the solid wood as if to hold back the entire world. The inside of your small home is dark and quiet. The fire in the hearth has burned down to low, glowing embers. Your husband is not here. Has he gone to the alehouse to drown his shame in drink? Or is he simply too ashamed to face you? The house smells of stale bread and cold ashes. It doesn't feel like a comforting, managed space it was this morning. It feels empty, desolate. You are an intruder in your own life. You light a tallow candle, the small, flickering flame doing little to push back the encroaching shadows. The house is full of ghosts, the ghost of the woman you were yesterday, the ghost of the peace you once had. A fascinating and sad detail from some historical accounts is the economic impact of such a punishment. A woman's reputation to her family's economic standing. If she was a brewer, would people still buy her ale? If she sold eggs, would her neighbors still trade with her? The label of scold could lead to a social and economic boycott, a slow, quiet shunning that could be just as devastating as the bridal itself. Whether this was a conscious, organized effort or a more organic result of social is debated by historians, but the potential for financial ruin was very real. You stand in the middle of your home, the heart of your small kingdom, and you feel utterly disenfranchised. You have been stripped of your voice, your dignity, and your standing in the community. The punishment was designed to put you in your place, and it has succeeded. Your place, it seems, is here in the dark, alone, surrounded by the silent evidence of a life that was shattered in the space of a single day. You don't know what tomorrow will bring. You don't know how you will face the baker, the butcher, or the woman who turned her back. All you know is the profound, aching emptiness that the iron bridle has left in its wake. You find a bucket of water by the hearth and pour some into a small wooden basin. Your movements are slow, deliberate, as if you are a stranger learning how to operate this body. You dip a piece of rough linen into the cool water and bring it to your face. The sting as the water touches the raw, chafed skin on your cheeks and chin makes you gasp. It's a sharp, clean pain, a reminder of the bridal's intimate, abrasive presence. You wash your face carefully, gently, trying to erase the filth and the memory of the day. But the soreness in your jaw and the swollen tenderness of your tongue are internal reminders that can't be washed away. There is no mirror in your house. Mirrors are a luxury for the very wealthy, large sheets of polished steel or impossibly expensive Venetian glass. Your only way of seeing your own reflection is in a still pool of water or a particularly shiny pewter plate. You find one such plate, one your mother gave you, and pour a little water into it. The surface is dark and distorted, but it's enough. You hold the plate up in the flickering candlelight and look. The face that stares back at you is a grotesque caricature of your own. Your eyes are puffy and red from silent weeping. Your hair is a wild, disheveled mess. There are angry red marks, like burns on your cheeks and under your chin where the iron cage rubbed against your skin. Your lips are slightly swollen. You look haunted, broken. You look like a madwoman. You trace the red marks on your cheek with a fingertip. These are the stigmata of your shame, the visible brand of your punishment. They will fade in a few days, but you know you will feel their phantom presence for much longer. You try to see the woman from yesterday in this reflection, the one who worried about chickens and the price of salt. You can't her. She is gone. In her place is this wild-eyed stranger, the woman who has been publicly caged and displayed. This experience of profound self-alienation is a common thread in accounts of trauma and public shaming throughout history. The punished individual is forced to see themselves through the eyes of the crowd, to internalize the label they have been given. You were called a scold, a disruptive, ugly force. The face in the reflection seems to confirm it. The punishment has a terrible, self-fulfilling logic. It makes you look like the monster they said you were. You put the plate down, the water sloshing over the side. The distorted image of your face breaks apart and disappears. You wish it were that easy to dismiss the real thing. Your husband finally comes home. The door creaks open and he steps inside, bringing a gust of cold night air with him. He stops when he sees you. He doesn't come closer. He just stands there in the doorway, silhouetted against the darkness outside. The space between you feels vast and impassable. He looks at your face, at the red marks at your swollen eyes. His own face is a mask of misery and shame. He doesn't ask if you are all right. He doesn't offer comfort. He simply says, his voice rough with an emotion you can't quite place, "The whole town is talking." "I know," you whisper, your voice still hoarse. They say, "I cannot control my own wife," he says, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. His humiliation is all about him, about his status as a man, as the head of a household. In this moment, he is not your partner in suffering, he is another victim, but a victim of a different kind. His pride has been wounded. His authority has been publicly undermined. This is a key aspect of the social dynamics at play. The punishment of a wife was also an indirect punishment of her husband. It publicly declared his failure to perform his patriarchal duty. Some historians argue that this was part of the point. It pressured husbands to police their wives' behavior more strictly, to avoid their own share of the public shame. The system turned husbands into domestic jailers. The question of whether most husbands resented the authorities for this or resented their wives for causing it is a complex one, with the answer likely varying from one man to another. A strange and little-known fact is that in some rare instances, a husband could be the one to formally request that his scolding wife be punished, essentially outsourcing his domestic authority to the town officials. This was an extreme measure, a public admission of his own failure, but it did happen. What would you have had me do? You ask, a spark of your old fire returning. Let her insult me. Let her ruin my name without a word of defense. You should have been silent, he retorts, his voice rising. You should have held your tongue, like a decent woman. Look what your pride has brought us. His words are a slap as painful as the bridle itself. He is blaming you. He is siding with the town, with the magistrate, with Agnes. He is reinforcing the judgment that has just been passed upon you. There will be no comfort here, no solace, no us against the world. There is only you and the world, and him standing with it. The fragile hope you had for some small measure of comfort in your own home dissolves. You are truly, utterly alone. You stare at your husband, the man you have shared a bed and a life with, and you see a stranger. Just like the woman in the reflection, you are two strangers in a dark room, bound together by a shared shame that is tearing you apart. You turn away from him, back towards the dying embers of the fire, and wrap your arms around yourself. The chill you feel has nothing to do with the night air. The next morning, the sun rises with an indifferent cruelty. For the rest of the town, it is just another day. For you, it is the first day of your new life as a marked woman. The thought of leaving the house, of facing the world, fills you with a paralyzing dread. But you have no choice. The cow must be milked, water must be fetched from the well, and life, in its relentless, mundane way, must go on. You force yourself to open the door. The lane outside is quiet. You take a deep breath and step out, your water bucket in hand. Immediately you feel it, the change. It's not something you see, but something you sense. A subtle shift in the atmosphere. The air itself seems to be watching you. Your neighbor on the other side, a quiet weaver named Elspeth, is sweeping her doorstep. Normally, she would greet you with a warm good morrow. This morning, she sees you, her eyes widen for a fraction of a second, and she gives a short, jerky nod before quickly turning and disappearing back inside her house, closing the door a little too firmly behind her. The snub is as clear as a spoken insult. This is how it will be. Not open hostility perhaps, not anymore. The town has had its dramatic spectacle. Now comes the quieter, more insidious phase of the punishment, the shunning. It's a slow, steady erosion of your social bonds, a death by 1,000 tiny cuts. You walk towards the communal well at the end of the lane. A group of women are already there, chatting as they wait their turn. As you approach, their conversation falters and dies. A blanket of awkward silence descends. They don't look at you directly, but you can feel their sideways glances. They are examining you, inspecting the results of your punishment. They are looking for the marks on your face. They are assessing your posture, your expression. Are you broken? Are you defiant? You are a social experiment, and they are the scientists. They are testing the effectiveness of the town's justice. Your behavior from this day forward will be scrutinized, analyzed, and discussed in hushed tones over hearth-fires and market stalls. The bridal was the formal punishment. This is the informal, ongoing surveillance. One of the women, a butcher's wife known for her piety, gives you a thin, tight-lipped smile. "Let us hope," she says, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "that yesterday's lesson was well learned. The Lord favors a quiet spirit in a woman." It's a piece of pious, unsolicited advice, but it's also a threat. It's a reminder of your place and a warning not to step out of it again. You say nothing. You have learned that much. Silence is your only shield now. You fill your bucket at the well. The simple physical task of working the winch feeling strangely grounding. The women watch you. The silence a palpable, judging presence. You do not look at them. You lift your heavy bucket and turn to go. This process of reintegration after a public shaming is a fascinating if brutal social mechanism. The community has violently expelled you, and now you must earn your way back in. But the price of re-entry is complete and utter conformity. You must be quieter, more invisible than ever before. You must perform the role of the tamed woman flawlessly. Any spark of your old self, any hint of defiance, will be seen as proof that the punishment was insufficient. The irony is that the label of scold can never be truly erased. Even if you are a model of silent obedience for the rest of your life, you will always be the woman who once wore the bridle. It becomes a permanent part of your identity, a piece of local folklore. Do you remember her? Oh, she's quiet now, but years ago. Some historians have debated whether this was the intended outcome, or just a byproduct. Was the goal to reform the woman, or to permanently brand her as a warning to others? The evidence suggests the latter was often the more powerful effect. The story of the punished scold became a tool for mothers to control daughters, for husbands to control wives, for the community to police itself. As you walk back to your house, your shoulders aching from the weight of the water, you pass a group of children playing in the mud. They stop their game and stare at you. One of them, a bold little boy, cups his hands around his mouth and makes a muffled, moaning sound, a crude imitation of the sounds you made yesterday in the bridal. The other children giggle. The sound hits you like a physical blow. Your shame is now a children's game. Your deepest humiliation has become a source of cruel fun. You hurry past, your eyes stinging with fresh stares, and slam your door shut. You lean against it, the water from the bucket sloshing onto the floor. Then you finally let out a single, silent sob. They have succeeded. They have tamed you. The bridle is gone, but its cage is still there, an invisible prison of fear and shame that you will now carry with you wherever you go. You are free, but your world has shrunk to the size of your own small, silent house. Days bleed into weeks. The angry red marks on your face slowly fade, first to faint pink lines, then to nothing, leaving no visible trace. The soreness in your jaw subsides. Your tongue no longer feels swollen and clumsy. You can speak normally, your voice returning to its usual pitch and strength. The physical wounds, the surface-level evidence of your ordeal, have healed. But healing is a deceptive word. The body's ability to mend itself is a simple, biological process. The mind is a different country altogether. The memory of the iron, the weight of it, the taste of it, the suffocating silence it imposed that does not fade. It has become a part of your internal landscape, a dark, jagged mountain range in the territory of your thoughts. You have learned your lesson well. You are a model of quiet conformity. At the market, you no longer haggle with the merchants. You accept the first price they offer, your eyes downcast. You pay what they ask without a word of protest, even when you know you are being cheated. The cost of a few extra pennies is nothing compared to the cost of speaking up. In the lane you are a ghost. You move silently, keeping to the edges of the street, avoiding contact. When you see neighbors approaching, you find a reason to turn down a different path or duck into a doorway until they have passed. You have mastered the art of being invisible. Your relationship with your husband has settled into a cold, brittle truce. The angry recriminations have ceased, replaced by a heavy, unspoken resentment that fills the small house like a damp fog. He speaks to you only when necessary, in short, functional sentences. Is the meal ready? I need my shirt mended. There is no warmth, no shared laughter, no easy intimacy. The bridal broke something between you, something essential. He looks at you and sees his own shame. You look at him and see a man who stood by and watched your humiliation, a man who blamed you for it. The love that once existed is buried under layers of shame and bitterness. The psychological impact of such punishments is a field where historians must tread carefully, as we can't interview the subjects. But by studying accounts of public shaming from other eras, like survivors of the pillory or stocks, a pattern emerges. Victims often speak of a lasting sense of fear, anxiety, and a deep-seated distrust of their community. They experience flashbacks, nightmares. The world no longer feels like a safe place. This is the long-term legacy of state-sanctioned humiliation. You have nightmares. You dream you are back in the Guildhall, the heavy iron cage descending over your head. You dream you are tied to the church gate, the fly buzzing at your face, unable to scream. You wake up in the dark, your heart pounding, the phantom taste of rust in your mouth. There is a strange, lesser-known aspect of the skull's bridle that highlights its deep psychological cruelty. Some bridles were designed with deliberately grotesque features, a long phallic nose, or a mockingly lolling tongue. The intent was not just to silence, but to dehumanize, to turn the woman into a monstrous caricature. The wearer wasn't just being punished for her actions, she was being transformed into a literal monster, her identity overwritten by the symbolism of the mass. The question of whether these more elaborate bridles were common or were exceptional pieces for particularly notorious women is still a subject of academic inquiry. One afternoon you are in your small garden, tending to your herbs, when you hear a cry from next door. It's Agnes' young daughter, who has fallen and scraped her knee. You hear Agnes trying to comfort her, but the child is wailing inconsolably. Before the incident, you would have gone over immediately. You would have offered a clean rag, a soothing word, perhaps a bit of comfrey from your garden to make a poultice. You were neighbors. That's what neighbors did. But now you hesitate. You stand frozen, hidden behind the wattle fence. The child's cries are a hook pulling at the remnants of your old self, the woman who helped and engaged. But the fear is a stronger force. What if Agnes thinks you are intruding? What if she accuses you of something else? The risk is too great, so you do nothing. You stand silently in your garden, listening to the child cry, until Agnes finally manages to soothe her and takes her inside. You are paralyzed by the memory of the iron. The punishment hasn't just silenced your tongue, it has severed your connection to the community, killing the simple, everyday compassion that once bound you together. The physical scars are gone, but the true wound, the one that has crippled your ability to connect with your fellow human beings, that wound remains wide open. And you suspect it will never ever heal. You have survived the bridal, but you are not sure if the person who survived is truly you. Time, the great healer and the great thief, moves on. A year passes, then 2, then 5. The sharp edges of your trauma begin to dull, not because the wound has healed, but because you have learned to live around it. The nightmares come most frequently. The constant, gnawing anxiety recedes into a low background hum of caution. You have perfected the art of being a ghost in your own town. Your story, however, has taken on a life of its own. You are no longer just a woman, you have become a local legend, a cautionary tale. Your name is invoked by mothers to quiet unruly daughters. Hush now, or you'll end up like the woman from down the lane. Your punishment has become a piece of shared local history, a landmark in the collective memory of the town. When newcomers arrive, they are told the story. You see that woman there, the quiet one? 10 years ago, they put the pranks on her. A terrible tongue she had, they say. The story gets embellished with each telling. In some versions, you were a witch who cursed your neighbor's cow. In others, you were so foul-mouthed that you made the vicar faint. You have been stripped of your own narrative. Your real, complicated human story replaced by a simple, sensationalized fable that serves the community's needs. This transformation from person to folklore is a common fate for those who suffer public and memorable punishments. They lose control over their own life story. The community becomes the author, and the narrative they write is always one that justifies their own actions and reinforces their own values. The real you, the woman who was angry about an overpriced piece of cloth, who loved her children, who had a spat with her neighbor over a chicken, is erased. One day you are at the market buying flour. You have aged. There are streaks of grey in your hair, and your face is etched with lines of a quiet, weary sorrow. A young woman with a small child is at the stall next to you. The child is being fussy, and the mother, exasperated, says, "Behave yourself, or the scold with the iron mask will come and get you." The child falls silent, his eyes wide with fear. The mother catches you looking, and a faint flush of embarrassment colors her cheeks. She doesn't know who you are. To her, you are just another anonymous middle-aged woman. The scold with the iron mask is a mythical creature, a character from a nursery rhyme. She has no idea she is speaking to the source of the legend. You feel a strange, hollow sensation in your chest. It's not anger, not anymore. It's a profound and weary sense of detachment. You are standing right there, and they are talking about you as if you are a ghost. The scold's bridle itself, the physical object, sits locked away in its chest in the Guildhall. It is brought out less and less frequently. The world is changing, slowly, imperceptibly. New ideas about justice and humanity are beginning to circulate, trickling down from the cities and universities. The raw, brutal spectacle of public shaming is starting to be seen by some as unseemly, as something belonging to a more barbarous age. The actual decline in the use of the bridle is a topic historians find complex. There was no single law that abolished it. Its use just faded away, patchy, over the course of the 17th and 18th centuries. Some towns clung to it longer than others. The last recorded use of a bridle in the UK is surprisingly late, well into the 19th century. Its disappearance was part of a broader shift in social attitudes, a move away from public, physical punishment towards imprisonment and other forms of institutional control. Agnes is old now too. She is a stooped, frail woman who rarely leaves her house. Her husband, the blacksmith, died years ago. You sometimes see her grandchildren playing in the lane. The fiery anger that once defined her has long since burned out, leaving only ashes. You have not spoken a word to each other in over 20 years. The wall of silence erected on that day has proven to be more durable than stone. Your children have grown and moved away, creating their own lives in other towns, away from the shadow of their mother's shame. Your husband passed away last winter, and you live now as a widow, a quiet, solitary figure. Your town has forgotten you, the real you. But it has remembered the scold. She is a useful ghost, a story that helps keep the social order intact. Your personal tragedy has been repurposed into a public utility. You look at the young mother and her child, and you feel a strange, distant pity for them. They are living in a world that is still shaped by the echoes of your pain, a world that still uses the fear of female anger as a tool of control. The iron may be locked away, but its shadow was long. All right, let's take a step back. Let's pull the camera away from the muddy lane into your quiet, haunted life. Let's float up above the thatched roofs, above the church spire, and look at this whole grim business from a wider, more historical perspective. Where did this monstrous piece of Irumagini even come from? who woke up one day and thought, you know what would solve neighborhood disputes? A face skate. The origins of the scold's bridle, or the branks, are, like so many things from this period, frustratingly murky. There's no single patent filing or inventor we can point to. It seems to have emerged from the murky soup of European folk justice and local legal customs. The first clear, documented mentions of its use as a formal punishment appear in Scotland in the latter half of the 16th century. Records from Glasgow and Edinburgh from the 1560s and 70s describe the brank as being used on women who had slandered their neighbours or the town's officials. From Scotland, its use seems to have spread south into England and, to a lesser extent, to other parts of Europe. But its conceptual roots might be even older and stranger. Some historians speculate a connection to medieval folklore and demonology. In a world that firmly believed in a literal devil and demonic possession, an uncontrolled, venomous tongue could be seen as an instrument of Satan. The idea of physically restraining or casting out this evil has a certain grim logic to it. The bridle, in this light, isn't just a punishment, it's a quasi-exorcism, a physical tool to combat a spiritual failing. The very design of some bridles supports this theory. As we touched on before, some weren't just simple cages. They were deliberately shaped to look like the heads of grotesque beasts or demons. By forcing a woman to wear such a mask, the authorities were visually transforming her into the monster they believed her to be on the inside. It was a powerful piece of propaganda, essentially saying, this is what her soul looks like. Now, let's talk about the name. Scold's bridle is key. A bridle is what you put on a horse, an animal, to control it, to make it docile and obedient. The choice of this word is incredibly revealing. It explicitly compares the outspoken woman to an untamed animal that needs to be broken. It's a to love domestication. This framing was no accident. It perfectly captured the patriarchal worldview of the time, where a woman who defied male authority was seen as acting against her own nature and needed to be brought back into line, just like a stubborn mule. The actual mechanics of its use varied from town to town. In some places, the town council owned an official bridle, like the one we saw in your story, kept in the guildhall or jail. In others, a local lord might have one for use on his tenants. The decision to use it often fell to a local magistrate, a mayor, or a parish vestry, making it a very localized form of justice. This is why its use was so inconsistent across the country. Your town might have used it frequently, while a town just 10 miles away might have found the whole idea barbaric and preferred the Dunkings to law the public stocks for a similar offense. Why a bridle and not something else? This is a question historians are still chewing on. Why go to the trouble of crafting this specific, complex device? The theory is that the bridle was seen as the perfect punishment for a specific crime. It was an example of lex talionis, the principle of an eye for an eye. The offending part of the body, the tongue, was directly targeted. For a society that loved symbolism, this was a perfectly tailored, poetically cruel sentence. You sinned with your tongue, so your tongue will be punished. One of the more bizarre rabbit holes you can go down is the invention of the bridle. There are several apocryphal stories, almost certainly untrue, about its creation. One popular tale from the 19th century credits its invention to a specific Scottish magistrate who was plagued by a particularly sharp-tongued wife. It's a neat story, but it has no basis in fact. It's more likely a bit of misogynistic folklore created long after the fact to provide a simple, satisfying origin for a complex historical phenomenon. The truth is the bridle wasn't invented by one person. It evolved, a dark flower blooming from the soil of a society deeply anxious about female speech and social order. It was an idea given from an iron, an idea that proved to be terrifyingly effective. Now you might be thinking, after all of this, that the Scold's bridle was an exclusively female torment, a tool designed by men for the punishment of women, full stop. And for the most part, you'd be right. The overwhelming majority of victims, the very name Scold's bridle, and the social anxieties it targeted were all pointed squarely at women. It was, at its core, an instrument of gender-based social control. However, history, as always, has a few weird and surprising footnotes. It turns out that, in a few, very rare and exceptional cases, Men were also on the receiving end of this, or a similar punishment. It wasn't common, not by a long shot, but it did happen. And these exceptions tell us something interesting about the nature of power and speech in this era. So, what kind of man would get the bridal treatment? It wasn't for being a scold. That label was almost exclusively feminine. Instead, the male victims were typically punished for very specific verbal transgressions against authority. The most common one was blasphemy. In a society where the church and state were deeply intertwined, openly cursing God or questioning religious doctrine wasn't just a sin, it was a form of sedition. It was an attack on the very foundations of social order. For a crime this severe, some local authorities felt that a simple fine or a day in the stocks wasn't enough. They needed something more symbolic, something that directly punished the offending male. There are scattered court records, mostly from England and Scotland, that mention a blasphemous bridle or an iron gag being used on men. These devices were often functionally identical to the scold's bridle, designed to silence the wearer and parade them publicly. The goal was the same: to make a terrifying public example of the offender and to symbolically cleanse the community of their polluting words. Another offense that could occasionally earn a man a gag was sedition or extreme slander against a powerful figure, like the local lord or the king. Shouting the magistrate as a corrupt thief in the market square was a far more dangerous act than a woman calling her neighbor a cheat. It was a direct challenge to the power structure. In such cases, a bridle served the dual purpose of silencing the dissent and demonstrating the terrifying power of the authority they had dared to challenge. But here's the crucial difference. When a woman was bridled, she was being punished for behavior that was seen as a violation of her gender. She was being unwomanly. Her crime was speaking like a man, being assertive, loud and argumentative. When a man was bridled, he wasn't being punished for being unmanly. In fact, his crime was often in excess of what might have been seen as masculine traits: aggression, outspokenness, defiance, but directed at the wrong target, God or the state. This is a subtle but vital distinction that historians love to unpack. The punishment looked the same, but the underlying social meaning was different. For women, the message was: do not speak this way at all. It is not your place. For the rare male victim, the message was: you have aimed your powerful male voice at the wrong target. Direct it at your enemies or your subordinates, but not at your superiors. It was a lesson in hierarchy, not a lesson in hierarchy, not a blanket condemnation of their right to speak. There's even a debate among historians about the terminology. Some argue that we should be careful not to call the device used on men a scold's bridle, as that name is so gender-specific. They prefer more neutral terms like branks or iron gag when referring to male victims, to avoid conflating the two very different social contexts. It's a classic academic debate, finally slicing definitions to get at a more accurate truth. One particularly bizarre and rare variation of this was a punishment for habitual drunkards. A man who consistently drank his family into poverty and caused public disturbances might, in some localities, be paraded through town wearing a drunkard's cloak. This was a heavy wooden bow, worn over the torso, which was awkward and humiliating. In some extreme cases, this might have been combined with a gag to stop his drunken tirades. So while you, in your story, were suffering a punishment deeply rooted in misogyny, it's worth remembering that the desire to control and silence inconvenient voices wasn't exclusively aimed at women. It was aimed at anyone who threatened the rigid social and religious hierarchies of the time. It just so happened that women, by their very nature of being subordinate in that hierarchy, crossed that line far more easily and were punished for it far more often. The bridle was a versatile to love power, but it was a tool that found its most frequent and infamous use as a hammer to enforce the silence of women. This grim piece of social technology wasn't content to stay on one side of the Atlantic. Like so many other ideas, customs, and people from the old world, the scold's bridle, or at least the idea of it, packed its bags and took a long, miserable voyage across the ocean to the burgeoning English colonies in North America. The New World may have offered a promise of religious freedom and economic opportunity for some, but it did not, initially, offer a significant break from the deeply ingrained social hierarchies and methods of control of the old one. The Puritans and other early colonists who settled in places like the Massachusetts Bay Colony were on a mission to build a city upon a hill, a model Christian society. And a key part of that model was a strict, ordered, and patriarchal community. They brought with them English common law, English customs, and English anxieties. And one of the biggest anxieties they had was maintaining social cohesion and religious purity in the vast, savage wilderness of America. The stakes felt even higher than back home. Any crack in the social fabric, any sign of disorder, could be seen as a victory for the devil. So it's not surprising that punishments designed to enforce conformity and silence, dissent found fertile ground here. Stocks, pillories, and whipping posts were common sights on the village greens of New England. And the crime of being a common scold was as real an offense in Salem, Massachusetts, as it was in Suffolk, England. However, the story of the bridle in America is a bit more complicated and debated than its history in the UK. While the law recognized scolding as a crime, and the punishments of the dunking stool and stocks were definitely used for it, the physical evidence for the scold's bridle itself is much scarcer. There are very few surviving examples of American-made bridles, and the written references to their use are less frequent than in British record. This has led to a debate among historians. Did the colonists widely use the bridle, and we've just lost the evidence? Or was it an idea they were familiar with, but one they used only very rarely, preferring other methods of public humiliation? The current consensus leans towards the latter. The bridle seems to have been a much rarer sight in the colonies than it was in some parts of Britain. But it was used. There are records and accounts that confirm its presence. One of the most famous, though possibly embellished, stories concerns a woman named Anne Brewster in the mid-17th century. The legend goes that she was punished for her scolding tongue by being forced to wear a bridle. Another account mentions a woman in Long Island being threatened with the brank for her disruptive speech. Why might it have been less common? One theory is purely practical. In a new colony, a skilled blacksmith's time was incredibly valuable. He was busy making essential items: plowshares, nails, horseshoes, and weapons. Crafting a complex, non-essential item like a bridle might have been a low priority. A set of stocks, or a dunking stool, was easier and cheaper to build and achieved a similar goal of public humiliation. Another theory is more social. Perhaps in the smaller, more precarious colonial communities, there was a slightly different dynamic. While order was paramount, the labor of every individual, including women, was so vital for survival that a punishment that completely incapacitated someone for a day might have been seen as counterproductive. This is just a theory, of course, as the Puritans were certainly not shy about inflicting brutal punishments when they felt it was warranted. A fascinating and dark twist on this story of transported punishment is how these ideas were adapted for a new and even more brutal context: slavery. While the scold's bridle was rarely used on white colonists, similar devices, iron muzzles, gags, and masks became a terrifyingly common enough control used by slave owners on enslaved people in the American South and the Caribbean. These were used to prevent communication, to stop the singing of forbidden songs, to punish insongs, to punish insolence, or simply as an act of unimaginable cruelty. Some of these slave muzzles bear a chilling resemblance to the scold's bridle, a testament to how an instrument of social control can be repurposed for the even more horrifying goal of absolute dehumanization. So the journey of the bridle across the ocean is a story of continuity and change. The fundamental anxiety about disorderly speech and the desire to punish it publicly made the trip successfully. The colonists brought the crime of scolding with them, but the specific tool for the job, the iron bridle itself, seems to have been used more sparingly, perhaps overshadowed by other, more practical methods of shame, or eventually evolving into something even more sinister in the context of chattel slavery. The shadow of the iron cage reached the shores of the New World, reminding everyone that a new and didn't necessarily mean new rules for those who dared to speak out of turn. So what killed the scold's bridle? This instrument of shame, which haunted the streets of Britain and made a guest appearance in the American colonies for the better part of 3 centuries, didn't disappear overnight. There was no grand bridal abolition act of 1750. Its demise was a slow, creeping, uneven process, a death by 1,000 intellectual and social cuts. It faded from the scene less with a bang and more with a long, wheezing sigh of obsolescence. The most significant force working against the bridal was the intellectual movement we now call the Enlightenment. Beginning in the late 17th century and flowering in the 18th, thinkers like John Locke, Voltaire, and the Italian jurist Cesare Beccaria began to champion radical new ideas about humanity, justice, and government. They argued for reason over superstition, for individual rights, and for a more humane and rational system of justice. Beccaria's hugely influential 1764 book on crimes and punishments was a direct assault on the very principles that the bridal represented. He argued that punishment should be rational, proportionate to the crime, and aimed at deterrence, not just spectacle or retribution. He condemned torture and cruel and unusual punishments. The idea of strapping a metal cage to a woman's head for having a sharp tongue was the epitome of the kind of barbaric medievalis that these Enlightenment thinkers were fighting against. These ideas didn't stay locked up in academic books. They spread through coffee houses, pamphlets, and newspapers, slowly changing public attitudes. The educated upper classes began to see public, physical punishments not as a sign of strong justice, but as a sign of an uncivilized and backward society. A public whipping or a woman being paraded in a bridal started to be seen as an embarrassment, a stain on a town's reputation for being modern and sophisticated. This led to a shift in how justice was administered. The emphasis moved away from public shame and towards private correction. The prison, the asylum, and the workhouse began to replace the stocks, the pillory, and the bridal as the preferred tools for dealing with social deviance. The goal was no longer to make a public spectacle of the offender, but to remove them from society and, in theory, at least reform them in a controlled environment. This was seen as a more orderly, rational, and scientific approach to social problems. Of course, this change wasn't driven purely by lofty ideals. There were practical considerations too. As towns grew into cities during the 18th and 19th centuries, the old, intimate system of village justice, where everyone knew everyone else, began to break down. Public shaming is only effective if the public is a cohesive community that shares the same values. In a large, anonymous city, parading a woman in a bridal might just attract a curious mob, rather than reinforcing shared social norms. A centralized police force and a formal court and prison system were simply more effective for controlling a large, mobile population. And what about the women themselves? While there was no organized feminist movement in the way we'd recognize it today, individual women were increasingly finding their voices, writing and publishing and challenging the status quo. The very idea that a woman should be seen and not heard was starting to be questioned, at least in some circles. While this didn't directly lead to the bridal's abolition, it contributed to a cultural climate where such an overtly misogynistic punishment became increasingly untenable. A really fascinating and quirky piece of this history is what happened to the old bridals themselves. As they fell out of use, they didn't just disappear. Many of them were kept as local curiosities. They became museum pieces, dusty relics hanging on the wall of a church, a town hall, or a local antiquarian's collection. The object that once inspired terror now inspired a kind of morbid historical fascination. People would look at it and marvel at the barbarity of their ancestors, congratulating themselves on how much more civilized they had become. The bridal was transformed from a tool of active punishment into a symbol of a bygone era. So the scold's bridal died a slow death, starved by changing philosophies, replaced by new technologies of control, and eventually relegated to the cabinet of curiosities. Its ghost lingered, a reminder of a time when the community's response to a woman's inconvenient voice was not to argue with her, but to physically, brutally, and publicly shut her up with a cage of cold iron. So here we are, back in the present day, with the hum of a refrigerator instead of a blacksmith's hammer in the background. The scold's bridal is no longer a tool of active punishment. It's an artifact, a museum piece, a slightly horrifying answer in a trivia quiz. You can see them now, sitting quietly under glass in museums in Edinburgh, London, or a dozen small local historical societies. They look inert, ancient, and safely distant. But are they? The iron itself may be rusty and retired, but the idea behind it, the desire to silence, shame, and control women who are deemed too loud, too opinionated, too angry, has a surprisingly long and healthy afterlife. The bridle, as a symbol, still has echoes in our modern world. It has been transformed from a physical object into a powerful metaphor. Think about the language we still use today. When a woman speaks forcefully in a professional setting, shrill or aggressive modern, corporate-friendly synonyms for scold. When a female politician gives a passionate speech, commentators are as likely to critique her tone and her likability as they are her policies. Male politicians can shout, pound the podium, and be called passionate and strong. A woman who does the same is oft unlabeled hysterical or unhinged. This is the shadow of the bridle at work. It's the unspoken cultural assumption that a woman's voice has a much narrower band of acceptable expression. The internet and social media have created a whole new kind of public square, and with it, a new high-tech version of the shaming parade. When a woman expresses a strong opinion online, especially on a controversial topic, she often faces a barrage of abuse that is disproportionate to anything a man would receive for saying the same thing. The insults are often gendered, aimed at her appearance, her sexuality, or her right to even have a voice in the public sphere. This digital mobbing is a modern form of rough music, the pots and pans parade designed to humiliate and silence. It's a scold bridle made of pixels and code. The bridle also pops up in popular culture, a testament to its enduring power as a symbol of misogynistic oppression. You might see it in fantasy novels or video games as a torture device used by some evil regime. It appears in horror movies as a piece of genuinely scary historical paraphernalia. It's been used in feminist art and protests, a visceral image to represent the historical silencing of women's voices. It's a visual shorthand for a very specific kind of cruelty. One of the ongoing debates among historians and sociologists is about this very legacy. How direct is the line from the iron bridle of the 16th century to the online trolling of the 21st? Some argue it's a direct, unbroken lineage of patriarchal control, simply adapting its tools to the new technology. Others argue that's too simplistic, that the modern phenomena have their own complex causes and that drawing a straight line ignores centuries of social change, including the massive gains of the feminist movement. As always, the truth is probably somewhere in the messy, complicated middle. But it's hard to deny that the fundamental anxiety, the fear of the nasty woman, is a ghost that still haunts our culture. The story of the scold bridle, your story, is not just a dusty piece of history. It's a mirror. It reflects a darker part of human nature, the desire to enforce conformity through shame, the fear of the other, and the impulse to control those who challenge the comfortable order of things. It reminds us that the instruments of control don't have to be made of iron. They can be made of words, of expectations, of social pressure, of digital abuse. The physical bridle may be gone, but the struggle it represents, the struggle for a woman to be able to speak her mind, in anger or in joy, in protest or in praise, without fear of being punished for the volume of her voice, is far from over. The iron has been removed from your head, but the fight to dismantle the invisible cages continues, in every generation, in every generation, in every public square, both real and virtual. Your silent scream from under the lich gate all those centuries ago still finds its echo today, in the voices of those who refuse to be quiet. And now the story is over. The echoes of the market square begin to fade, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer grows distant, and the cold weight of the iron cage dissolves into the quiet warmth of your own bed. The world of wattle and daub, of whispered accusations and public shame, recedes like a tide going out, leaving only the soft, gentle sound of your own breathing in the stillness of the room. Feel the tension leaving your shoulders, a slow, gentle release. The journey is done. You are no longer in that muddy lane, you are safe here now. Let the narrative untether itself from your mind, allowing the images to soften and blur at the edges, like watercolor paintings left in the rain. The faces in the crowd lose their focus, their expressions melting away into a gentle haze. The sharp feeling of injustice softens into a deep, quiet understanding. Imagine yourself drifting now on a slow, calm river, the river of sleep. The banks are soft and green, and the air is still and peaceful. Each breath you take is a gentle push, moving you further downstream, further away from the noise of the day, further into the deep, restorative quiet of the night. There are no more words here, no more judgments, only a profound and welcoming silence. A silence not of restraint, but of peace. You are floating now, untroubled, weightless, unsecure. Let the current carry you into your dreams, into a place of rest and gentle forgetting. The end of the article. Good night.